Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to remove and replace the folding block. Now this arrangement is common to all aluminium scooters, although the folding block is different for every model, but the general idea is the very same. So first of all, we need to remove the over-center clamp. Now on the other side there is a large knurled nut, and in the middle of it there is a C spring washer. Now that needs to come off before we can get the knurled nut off, and the way we do that is to open the clamp, and it's got a spring in there, so fully push it in so that we get as much of the bolt through the hole as possible, and then screw it inwards, in other words to tighten it, because we want to expose the C washer, which can be quite a long way inside the sleeve here. So as much as we can. Now we should be able to see there's the little C washer. It moves around quite freely. It sits in a slot in the end of there. So using a very small screwdriver, we put that in the slot in the C washer and just gently prise it out. With a magnetic screwdriver it makes it easy. So that's the C washer. We'll put that in the box for safekeeping. Now again, applying pressure to the clamp on this side, we now need to unscrew this, but now we'll screw it all the way off. And you can see inside here there is a rubber insert, and if you try and remove this without removing the C-clip, it'll all get jammed up in there. Put that in the box and we'll remove the clamp. Now this is one of the later generation scooters. It has a plunger and a spring which fit into this piece here. The block, the other end of the pin fits in there, and the lever itself. The older scooters have a block. They don't have the spring arrangement like this, and the block is actually screwed to the side plate, so to get to it you have to take the whole thing out. But all the later ones are fitted with this similar arrangement. So once again, we'll put all those parts in a box for safekeeping. While we're at this stage, we're going to check that the push buttons are good and tight. This will affect the efficiency of the folding, and also this one where the plunger goes, make sure that's good and tight, and the push button on the other side. Now we're going to remove the main pivot bolt. This uses a 5mm Allen key, an Allen socket in this case, on each side. Box for safekeeping, and using a small drift knock the bolt out. Now by depressing both buttons, but one this side and one the other, we'll be able to lift the folding block completely out of the way, like so. Put that to one side. Now on the bottom of the folding block where it attaches to the chassis, we have two different sized bolts. This side they're a 5mm head, but this side is a countersunk bolt because the kickstand is here, and these are 4mm head. So we'll remove the kickstand side first. Using a 4mm socket. just as a point, sometimes you'll find the kickstand is that way round, but often customers don't like that because that bit's sticking out, so they'll tend to be over like that. I'll keep those in camera shot for the moment and demonstrate the difference between the two bolts. And the kickstand lifts away. And you can see why they're countersunk bolts, as there is a countersink in the kickstand to allow the bolt to sit flush in there. And we have a 5mm on the other side. Now these can sometimes be a bit tight because they have a thread lock on them. Depending on how much thread lock is put on, they can be either easy or quite difficult, but at least it stops them coming loose while the scooter is being ridden. Now before we remove the folding block, if you look at these two bolts, you can see quite clearly the difference between the two. This is the kickstand side and this is the other side, which is a dome-headed bolt. Also the shoulder here is much deeper as it needs to go through the kickstand before it goes into the chassis and the folding block. Those part numbers on the kickstand side, we are looking at a 1553, which is this one, and on the other side it's a part number 1161. The only difference here is that on the Sprite scooter it has a bolt which passes right through the chassis and right through the folding block, and it uses this on one side but a long internally threaded bolt that goes all the way through the folding block. That's the only difference. Now we can remove the folding block and replace it with a new one. So reassembly is just the reverse of what we've just done. So we'll put the kickstand inside in first. And it's wise just to do the kickstand side first because the mounting for the kickstand is plastic, and what you don't want to do is overdo it too much because it can split on this front edge. It won't do it at the back, but it might do it at the front. So to it just fairly tight, because when we put the other side in, it will pull the chassis together slightly and increase the tension on there anyway. So we don't want to do that too soon. And we put the other bolts in the other side. And we get them up to tension using the ratchet and give them a good pull. To be extra sure, you could put more Loctite on. Now we'll find that on this side these are much tighter than they were because the chassis has been pinched together with the bolt that side and it hasn't split the front. Now we have put the folding block back on, the steering back on, and once again depress both the buttons just to get it into place. It's going to be a bit tricky sometimes because you end up getting the buttons through the axle hole like so, and then fold it flat, and then the push button should locate to make it a little bit easier. We put the pivot bolt through. Remember, this is a 5mm bolt, both ends. And this needs to be good and tight. Speed things up using an ordinary Allen key to start with. It's important this bolt is really tight, because if it's not, it can cause the side plates to move about too much and possibly disengage from the folding block. So they need to be good and tight. We don't want any chance of them coming loose. Now we're going to reassemble the clamp. And we've got these components. We've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components. The clamp has a concave washer and needs to sit like so. It acts as a smooth pivot for the lever, and it fits into there, and it goes that way round so that when it's clamped it's up against the scooter. So this is a fiddly bit. We put the plunger on the spring, we put the plunger in there, and at the same time put this through the slot, locate it in there, and then push the whole assembly in towards the side of the scooter. As soon as you can, get the knurled nut onto that side to stop it springing apart. And as we did when we were dismantling it, push the clamp as far in as you can, hard up against the holder plate, and screw this in as far as you can, and you should be able to see the ridge in the end of this clamp bolt, which is where the little C-clip fits. It's probably a bit small for the camera to pick up, but it's just here. And the tricky bit now is pick up the C-clip with a handy magnetic screwdriver, and with a pair of long nose pliers, grip right on the very edge like so, and then we should be able to just feel for the slot and push it on. Now again, applying tension on this side, push it in, unscrew until it takes a little bit of effort to close the clamp. As well, to check it in the upright position, that's quite tight, but nothing's going to move here. But it might be too tight for some customers, so just back it off a little bit. And it's important that it takes a little effort to close. This will make sure that the scooter is good and solid, and that both of these buttons are engaged fully with the folding block.